Hello dolls and welcome back to another video. Today I would like to talk about one of my biggest muses, one of the women that made me truly fall in love with the 1960s and everything about it, and that is Marianne Faithfull. Marianne Faithfull has been one of my biggest inspirations ever since I first saw her, heard about her, and listened to her music. She was such an incredible artist, and I don't see her life story getting told a lot online, and so I wanted to take some time today to share the story of Marianne Faithfull's life with you. If you're listening to my podcast, which is always linked in the description box of all my videos, then a part of this video will be familiar to you because I'm going off of the same script. However, I did a little bit of tweaking here and there. I'm also going to read you a lot more excerpts. Most of what I'm telling you today comes from this book. This is Marianne Faithfull's autobiography, Faithfull. She wrote it together with David Dalton and first released it in 1994. I really adore this book, and I read a little bit from it in the episode, but as you can see, there are lots of marks in here, so I'll definitely tell you a little more, as well as just some more thoughts that I have and a couple more things about her that I feel like we should truly talk about. I really wanted to make this video even though I had already dedicated an episode to her after she passed earlier this year, because there's also so much footage of her that I really wanted to share with you. So today we're going to take a look at the incredible life of the woman who lived, Marianne Faithfull. Before we get into the video, I promised you a giveaway because we hit 30,000 subscribers. Thanks again so much, it truly means the world. And I have 3 bundled prizes here, so stay till the end to the video to find out what you can win and how you can enter. But yeah, without any more talking, let's get into the life of Marianne Faithfull, the woman who lived. She was the girl with the butter blonde hair and the faraway look in her eyes, drifting like a daydream through the London streets just as the city was beginning to bum with revolution. A convent-educated daughter of a baroness and a wartime spy, Marianne Faithfull seemed plucked from another time, ethereal, poetic, and a little tragic even before the tragedy began. One moment she was singing folk songs a cappella in smoky cafes, the next she was in Olympic studios, breathing trembling life into a delicate ballad called As Tears Go By. The press called her an angel with big tits, but that vulgar little headline hardly scratched the surface. Before long she'd become the face of swinging London, a darling of the tabloids and the underground alike, caught in a love affair with Mick Jagger that was equal parts mythology, love, and disaster. From the gilded corridors of Belgravia Flats to the dark, wild nights at Courtfield Road, Marianne moved through the decade like a beautiful ghost, always half in shadow. But this isn't the story about a muse or a girlfriend or a cautionary tale. This is the story of a woman who has lived many lives. As a pop singer, a drug addict, a street-sleeping exile, and a phoenix who rose raspier and more brilliant than ever. Behind the headlines, behind the Rolling Stones, there was always Marianne. And if you dig deeper, you might just find her, not as the world saw her, but as she really was, wild, wounded, and luminous. Chapter 1, Childhood Living. Marianne Evelyn Gabriel Faithfull was born on December 29th of 1946 at Queen Mary's Maternity House in Hampstead, London. Her father, Major Robert Glynn Faithfull, was a British Army officer and later a university lecturer in Italian literature. Her mother, Eva, was the daughter of Arthur Wolfgang Ritter von Sacher-Masoch, an Austro-Hungarian nobleman. She was born in 1918 in Budapest, but moved to Vienna to become a ballerina with the Max Reinhardt Company, where she performed works by Bertolt Brecht and Kurt Weill. The Sacher-Masoch family secretly opposed the Nazi regime in Vienna. About her parents, Marianne said, quote, "My father worked for MI6 and my mother was a baroness." Just because I don't think I said it yet, most of the quotes and pretty much everything is gonna come from this book. There are a couple more sources which are always linked in the description box, but I'm telling her story the way that she tells it in this book because I just think it is important to tell her story the way that she wanted it told, because her story has been told by the tabloids, by the media, and by other people over and over again, but this is the way that she experienced her life and that she went through life, and I feel like this is the version that we should talk about. Because let's face it, probably no one knew her better than she knew herself. Marianne wouldn't be the first in her family to become famous. Her maternal great-great-uncle was Leopold von Sacher-Masoch, whose erotic novel Venus in Furs, published in 1780, led to the term masochism. Her maternal grandfather had aristocratic roots in the Habsburg dynasty, and her maternal grandmother was Jewish. After her parents divorced when she was 6, Marianne moved with Eva, as she always referred to her mother, to Reading, Berkshire. She attended the St. Joseph's Roman Catholic convent school as a weekly boarder until she was 12. Quote, "I stopped boarding at convent school at 12 and would walk home each day, a latchkey kid, and prepare supper, very continental delicatessen food, for my working mother. Her mother would always leave detailed shopping lists behind, describing items like 4 very nice apples, 4 delicious bananas, and 2 really good lamb chops, which taught Marianne to appreciate quality ingredients and also gave her a taste for the finer things in life. Her father had ties to a commune where Marianne spent part of her earlier life. Quote, "My father belonged to a commune and the food was ghastly. My idea of food hell is the salad cream they'd pour all over bits of lettuce, cucumber, and tomato. It was disgusting." Marianne's relationship with her mother will play a huge part in her life later on. When reading the book, I could feel how much Marianne's mother loved her and how much Marianne loved her mother too. And it is interesting because while this book paints the portrait of Marianne Faithfull, it also paints the portrait of her mother and the incredibly strong and wonderful woman she was. And I feel like she passed a lot of these qualities down to her daughter. And there is this one story in the beginning of the book that I just wanted to read to you because I felt like it probably summed up who her mother was perfectly. "One day my best friend and I brought over a friend called Chris O'Dell. His mother was very ill with multiple sclerosis. His father was paralyzed and became violent when he drank. Shortly after we met him, his mother died and his aunt had to help nurse his father. Although it was obvious that Chris was desperately unhappy, who but Eva would have taken it upon herself to intervene? Noblesse oblige. My mother just went in there and took over. She rang his aunt, Ipie, who loved him, and told her, 'The father beats him. The situation is absolutely intolerable. Wouldn't you agree, my dear Ipie?' 'Yes, Eva, it's just wicked what that poor boy—' 'Exactly my point. And you will be so glad to know I have the solution. I'm taking Chris home to live with us.' Under normal circumstances, the poor woman might have objected. 'Well, that is terribly kind of you, Eva, but he's our nephew. You see, he's my sister's son, and rightfully we should be the ones to take him.' But Eva left no opening for the aunt whatsoever. Nobody ever could resist Eva when she had made up her mind. She was a force of nature. You did what she said. So the following week, Chris came to live with us. It was simply presented to us as fait accompli. We were now brother and sister, and that was that. Chris was 16, I was 13. I remember going on holiday together shortly after he moved in. Neither of us knew what was expected, but eventually we became friends." This is such a beautiful story, and it does show the kindness that her mother had and how much she wanted to care for others, which is something that'll come up later in the story again. And what I also found really interesting when reading the book is that Marianne said that her relationship with Chris was one of the few relationships with a man she had where she felt loved and appreciated, not in a sexual way. And I felt like that is a very important part and a really interesting account so early on, because she will get sexualized over and over again throughout this story, and I feel so bad for her. So I really like the thought that at least Chris really admired her for who she was. At just 13, Marianne decided to dip her toes into acting by joining the Progress Theater in Reading, while simultaneously singing a cappella in local coffee shops, covering songs like House of the Rising Sun and Blowing in the Wind, reminiscent of everything Joan Baez sang. With a record player at home, she passionately spent every penny she owned on records, from artists like Buddy Holly, the Everly Brothers, and Chuck Berry. By 17, at a Cambridge ball, she encountered her first love, John Dunbar. A world opened when I met John. John was different from any boy I had ever met. He was certainly the hippest. He wasn't actually at the ball, too cool for that. He would never have been caught dead at a bourgeois event such as that. But there was a party on the staircase at Churchill College, and as I was going up the kitchen, I passed one of the students' doors, and on it was a poster of the famous Da Vinci drawing, The Measure of Man. It was stunning, and I remember turning to the person I was with and saying, "Who lives here?" And at that moment, John came through the door. When I saw John, it was one of those things where everything else just pales around you. John had a beautiful, sensitive face, and he was the very model of happiness, circa 1963. He was wearing pressed jeans and a jacket and little horn-rimmed glasses. He wasn't quite 21 when I met him, and in his first year at Cambridge. We were immediately attracted to each other. I ditched my date. He was intense and unusual, and had a background very similar to my own. His mother, Tatiana, called Tanya, is Russian. The Dunbars were filmmakers, and equally irresistible in my eyes, they were a family. This was the beginning of my long addiction to families. Wherever I find a family, I try to get into it. I found that really interesting because you will see that Marianne has a really close bond with her mother, but at the same time, she always longs for that happy, perfect family life. Chapter 2, As Tears Go By, A Star is Born. There aren't many careers of which the start can be pinned down to a singular moment, but for Marianne, that was the case on a fateful day in early 1964. Marianne was only 17 when she attended a launch party with her boyfriend John. A teenage girl named Adrienne Posta had recorded a single produced by the Rolling Stones' flamboyant manager Andrew Luke Oldham, and this evening was set for the release party. John and Marianne had gone as guests of Peter Asher. Paul McCartney was there with Peter's sister Jane, and so were various members of the Rolling Stones. It is often said that Mick Jagger fell in love with Marianne the moment that he laid eyes on her that night. Quote, "At this point, the Stones were not much more than Bobby schoolboys. They had none of the polish of John Lennon or Paul McCartney, and compared to my John, they seemed very crass and boorish indeed. As for him, I wouldn't even have known he was there if he hadn't had a flaming row with his girlfriend, Chrissy Shrimpton. She was crying and shouting at him, and in the heat of the argument, her false eyelashes were peeling off." But Mick wasn't the only one immediately drawn to Marianne. I was sitting on the heater next to John when I noticed this strange creature, all beaky and angular like some bird of prey, lunge towards me. He looked powerful and dangerous and very sure of himself. I was glad when, at the last minute, he spun around and with his back to me addressed John. "Who is she? Can she act? What's her name?" handing John in the same breath an oversized, flashily printed card. "Andrew Luke Oldham, darling." He called everyone darling, especially men. It made them nervous, and that gave Andrew an edge. Andrew was all edge. He exuded menace, shock, razor blade hipness. John said, "She's called Marianne Faithfull, actually." "Oh, do come on, darling. You'll have to do better than that." "I couldn't believe it either when I first heard it," said John, "but it really is her name. I must be magnetically attracted to chicks with outrageous names. I once went out with a girl named Penelope Heaven, or so she said." Everyone laughed at that, and then Andrew asked, almost as an afterthought, "Can she sing?" John, "I think she can. Why the hell not? You can sing, can't you, Marianne?" And that was that. Just a week later, Marianne received a telegram through her mother, who still hadn't bought a telephone yet. The telegram simply read, "Be at Olympic Studios at 2 o'clock. Stop Andrew Oldham." Marianne took the train down to the city, where for the first time ever she set foot into a recording studio. He first presented her with a song called "I Don't Know How to Tell You." It was one of those big showbiz songs, but Marianne couldn't do it. This song just wasn't for her. Marianne had this one-of-a-kind voice, but she wasn't a vocalist like Diana Ross. Her voice needed a specific kind of song, which unfortunately she didn't know back then. Just as the musicians were about to pack up, Andrew gave her another song. It was a Stones B-side, the first song Mick and Keith had written together, a little tune called As Tears Go By. The Stones hadn't recorded it yet, so there was only one very raw version of Mick with Big Jim Sullivan on guitar. Andrew handed her a scrawled lyric sheet and they got to work. After the session, Mick and Keith gave her a ride back to the station. Mick wanted her to sit on his lap, but Marianne refused. Quote, "When As Tears Go By became a hit record, I left St. Joseph's in my last term and was gone almost overnight from my mother's life. She was utterly unprepared for this development. The area child whom she doted up and left without warning, never to come back." Early on, Marianne became a tabloid fixture. Soon she was on the cover of every major magazine, even though the stories and tales were either stretching the truth or flat out lies. Even though many of the articles were either stretching the truth or just flat out lies. Journalists came to these interviews with an image of me that had been rather skillfully prepackaged by Andrew and Andrew's publicist, Andy Wickham. Andy Wickham had a fixation about blondes. He finally found his Galita in Goldie Hawn. I didn't quite fit his specific obsession, but I was wrapped up with a bow nevertheless. It was with his press release for As Tears Go By that most of the misconceptions began. Marianne Faithfull is the little 17-year-old blonde who still attends a convent in Reading, daughter of the baroness Ariso. She is lissom and lovely, with long blonde hair, a shy smile, and a liking for people who are long-haired and socially conscious. Marianne digs Marlon Brando, Woodbine, cigarettes, poetry, going to the ballet, and wearing long evening dresses. She is shy, wistful, wave-like. All these half-truths strung together created a very misleading image. That press release, along with the Village of the Damned photo of me on the other side, projected an eerie fusion of haughty aristocrat and folky bohemian child woman. It was a tantalizing, ready-made fantasy. Unfortunately, it wasn't me. For all of her life, Marianne would be painted by the press as someone she wasn't, and that is why I wanted to tell her story in the way it is written down in her book. And I just feel for her because her life was publicized so early on, and she didn't have too much control over what was written about her. And even though I don't think Andrew and Andy wanted her anything bad, I understand that she didn't quite love the way that they presented her in the media. I guess it is just that they thought this would make her album sell well, which it did work, but I understand that being sexualized in that way so young just does not feel good. Unfortunately, it's a quite standard practice in the music industry, and I feel like it's still done, but I think it is really brave and important of Marianne that so early on in the book she just says, listen, whatever you've read in the tabloids about me, part of it might be true, part of it might be stretching the truth, and part of it might be completely made up. Because I feel like it is something that we forget when we read in tabloids and magazines. You often think there must be some truth to this, or like this has to be happened to some degree. And reading in the book that she flat out says, this didn't happen, they made me out to be this person. For example, they used her background, her family background, but made it to be something entirely else. And they wanted her to have this great image. And I mean, it did work, but I understand that now, years later, when she wrote this in the 90s, she just wanted to set the record straight. Soon her days were filled with concerts, interviews, and recording sessions. But this wasn't without a struggle. She often felt lonely, and she felt guilty about having left her mother. Eva wasn't doing well, as evident in the letters she sent her daughter during this time. October 9th, 1964. My dearest Marianne, I am a little sad I have not heard from you at all. Not a line to tell me if you are all right. I cannot phone from strange people as it takes hours to get hold of you or not at all. And I'm getting frantic. I think I would give everything for a phone so that you could ring me. But obviously you have quite forgotten my existence, or I would have heard something. My love to all, and a big hug and kisses for you, my faithless darling. Eva, Mama. But Marianne was busy with her career that was slowly but surely taking off. She toured with Roy Orbison and recorded a couple more tracks, including This Little Bird, Summer Nights, and Come Stay With Me, which were all quite successful, but her personal life was turbulent as well. She got engaged to John, which caused a great flurry in the world of pop. Soon reporters started to write about it, and her engagement stirred quite the controversy. Some even wondered, quote, could John sing? While the bassist of Roy Orbison's band, The Candy, famously smashed a hotel room to protest her engagement. Yet this was only the beginning of a cascade of life-changing events. Quote, I discovered I was pregnant in April of 1965. I had a terrible yearning for a child, so when I got pregnant with Nicholas, I was thrilled. I was harboring the somewhat fanciful delusion that getting married and having a baby would help to ground me. Things seemed to be spinning out of control. I had a premonition that this might be my last chance. I think that this kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier when she said that she always wanted to be part of the Dunbar family because they were an actual family. And so I feel like that is why she wanted to have a family so early on, because that was kind of like what she yearned for. She really wanted to have a fully functioning family, and I think her mother gave her all to raise her in the best way possible, but as a child of divorce myself, I understand that sometimes all you wish for is to just have two parents who are not only in the picture but also living together, and just the fact that you always live two lives in two different places. That is what it was like for me. I was like a week at my mom's house, a week at my dad's house, here and there. I always needed to pack up my stuff, and I just wanted to have one home and one family, and I just understand that that wish might translate into having your own family quite young. Marianne vowed herself that she was going to be good, quitting alcohol and drugs for the pregnancy. During this time, she met Bob Dylan. She was fascinated and inspired by his music, poetry, and whole being. There's footage on YouTube, which I will show you if YouTube does allow me to, where Marianne is singing with Joan Baez, and they sound so beautiful together. And there's this little like tipping noise in the back, which comes from Bob, who was writing on a typewriter while the both of them were singing. It's quite lovely. If I cannot put it here, make sure to check it out.
What key you do it in?
Marianne married John on May 6th of 1965 in Cambridge, with Peter Asher as their best man, and soon after, on November 10th, her son Nicholas Dunbar was born. Quote, Nicholas gazed back at me with the eyes of a very old soul indeed. He had the answer, but he wasn't telling, she fondly remembered. The whirlwind of her early married life took an unexpected turn in the summer of 1966, when Marianne found herself a near-permanent guest at Brian Jones and Anita Pallenberg's flat. There, in the midst of an unconventional household and frequent visits from Keith and the persistently flirtatious Mick, she became entangled in the debauched rhythms of the Stones world. While Marianne was trying her best to live a normal married life, no one around her was living an even remotely normal one. When she and John went to Paris for their honeymoon, he invited a bunch of people over, and just like the Stones, they dabbled in drugs too. Marianne, who had only ever done pot, was equally disgusted and fascinated. Quote, I would wake up in the morning, there would be no heat. I'd have to step over several people crashed in the living room. I'd go into the kitchen to warm up a bottle for Nicholas and find a draining board strewn with bloody needles. One morning I went round the whole flat and collected all these jacks, these little heroin pills hidden all over the place. There were hundreds of them, and I flushed them down the toilet. I couldn't take it anymore, but I stuck it out for 2 years, trying to live my normal middle-class life as fast as I could for as long as I could. In this bohemian, druggy household, I had been badly miscast as Mother Angel, girlfriend, wife, and Blessed Virgin Mary, an insufferable role that I finally began to hate with a passion. I was bored, I was lonely, I had begun to find John and his cerebral junkies tiresome, and all around me was the center of the world of the 1960s. I wanted to see what all the fuzz was about. Chapter 3. When Mick Met Marianne. A couple weeks later, after a Stones gig where they played alongside Ike and Tina Turner, Marianne found herself in a hotel room with several people, including Anita, Keith, Brian, and Mick. After watching Roman Polanski's Repulsion, which, by the way, is one of my favorite films, said it before, I'm gonna say it again, Roman Polanski, very troubled man. I don't wanna go into the whole discussion here, but this is kind of like a separate the art from the artist kind of situation. But his films, especially from the 60s, are one of a kind. If you have not seen Repulsion yet, go and watch it. It is fantastic. After the film was done, people started to leave the room until eventually only Mick and Marianne were left. After a long pause, Mick said, "It's one of the things I'm quite interested in right now." "Excuse me?" "Oh, you know, disturbed states of mind, that kind of thing." It was already dawn. We'd been circling each other for that long, but I still didn't know what I really wanted to do. I always found that moment before having sex so difficult. It's just excruciating for me. So, to put it off a bit, I said, "Let's go for a walk." We went out and walked in a park near the hotel. I didn't know Mick at all, and my way of asserting whether he was alright or just a jerk was to ask him a lot of questions about King Arthur. Eventually, they went back to the room and spent the night together. Afterwards, Marianne took her son to Positano to spend a couple of days with her nanny. Upon arriving, she was thrilled to find several notes from Mick. Here I was with little Nicholas, married to an unworldly man who never made a penny. I was supporting us all by myself, something I never much cared for, and he was being very attentive to me, and romantic, and courting me. It didn't take long for the news to break, and Mick and Marianne became the new it couple. Their relationship was wildly publicized, and she left John to be with Mick. However, it would take until 1970 for their divorce to be finalized. The couple became a notorious fixture of swinging London. They spent their days touring or hanging around London's coolest clubs, shopping. Marianne adored shopping with Mick, or out with Anita, Brian, and Keith. Marianne became part of the Stones' inner circle and enjoyed every second of it. Although she was with Mick, they didn't take monogamy too serious. She spent a night with Keith, while Mick spent countless with other women. There were lots of things I could have done at the age of 19 that would have been more healthy than becoming Mick Jagger's inamorata. In the end, it doesn't matter that hearts got broken and that we sweated blood. Maybe the most you can expect from a relationship that goes bad is to come out of it with a few good songs. Her career was thriving. She released North Country Made and Faithful Forever in 1966 and Love in a Mist the following year. All of these were quite successful, and so was her acting career. Marianne made her professional stage debut in 1967 at London's Royal Court Theatre, where she portrayed Irina in a production of Chekhov's Three Sisters, sharing the stage with acclaimed actresses Glenda Johnson and Avril Elgar. Prior to this, in 1966, she made a cameo appearance as herself in Jean-Luc Godard's film Made in the USA. She further expanded her filmography with a role in the 1967 film I'll Never Forget What's Its Name. In the French television film Anna, she showcased her vocal talent by performing Serge Gainsbourg's Ir en Demain. 1968 saw her starring as a leather-clad motorcyclist in The Girl on a Motorcycle, a personal favorite of mine, a film that propelled her to fame in France. This was aided by a widely circulating photograph that showed Alain Delon and Mick Jagger alongside Marianne Faithfull. These pictures are absolutely priceless. They're somewhat of a meme now. People basically say you can be Mick Jagger, but you'll never be Alain Delon, or something along the lines of this. Maybe like, when you're Mick Jagger, but Alain Delon will still get your girl. Something like this. It's hilarious. I adore these pictures. I also adore what Marianne is wearing. Through basically everything, she's one of my biggest fashion inspirations, and I'm sure this video will have hundreds of pictures of her, but I cannot encourage you to just go and look at even more pictures, because they're all fabulous. She also participated in Kenneth Anger's Lucifer Rising. In 1969, she played Ophelia in a London Roundhouse production of Hamlet, which was later adapted into a film. But as much as it was fun to hang around, do drugs, only take the roles she wanted, and live this extraordinary life, there was one clear downside. Marianne was starting to lose herself in a drug addiction. What had started as a fun thing to do at parties slowly but surely consumed her life. Chapter 4, Redlands Rumble. By the beginning of 1967, there were highly placed people in Her Majesty's government who actually saw us as enemies of the state. It was wild. I envisioned the wizened gents of Whitehall, old Etonians dressed in frock coats with umbrellas and exceedingly polished shoes, the cranky ancient custodians of a crumbling empire. They had been breathing the dust of the Industrial Revolution for close to 100 years, and they were used to having things their way. And so, improbable as it may seem, when these little men in Whitehall felt that the Rolling Stones were a threat to the safety and security of the United Kingdom and its dependencies, they decided to actually do something about it. Neville Chamberlain, diplomat shuffling papers in a dusty, ancient office, plotting the downfall of the Rolling Stones. In the late 1960s, British authorities took an aggressive stance against musicians and the wider drug culture that had become emblematic of the era's countercultural revolution. There was a prevailing concern that high-profile figures, with their unabashed use of drugs, were not only embodying but actively promoting a lifestyle that threatened traditional societal norms and destabilized the fabric of post-war British society. Law enforcement saw busting these musicians as a way to send a potent message about the dangers of unchecked hedonism, a calculated effort to reassess control in a time when youth culture was challenging long-established conventions. These relentless crackdowns, punctuated by media spectacles and stringent policies, underscored a broader attempt by the establishment to curtail what it viewed as a perilous influence on a rapidly changing generation. On February 12 of 1967, that downfall was set to start with the infamous Redlands drug bust. It became one of the most infamous scandals in swinging London, forever altering Marianne's public image. That night, she and Mick were at Keith's country estate in West Withering, Sussex, where a small gathering had formed. It was a stormy night, and as Marianne later recalled, the house had a dark and medieval atmosphere, one that would soon take on a nightmarish reality. After receiving a tip-off from News of the World, which had published an exposé on the Rolling Stones' drug use just days prior, police raided the house. Marianne was discovered wearing nothing but a fur rug, an image that would haunt her for decades. I want to add here that while this was a party, at this point in her life, Marianne was so used to the constant partying, to the fact that there were always people around, that she didn't treat this in a way that most people would treat a party. Basically, she arrived and after a couple of hours got tired and decided to take a bath, and she was just in there by herself when the police came in, and so she just grabbed the thing that was closest to her, which was a fur rug. But people made it out to be this sexualized thing, when in reality all it was just the matter of circumstances that she was in at that very moment. She was the only woman present, and this little detail would be plastered all over the newspapers. It destroyed me, she later said, reflecting on the double standards of the era. To be a male drug addict and to act like that is always enhancing and glamorizing. A woman in that situation becomes a slut and a bad mother. The police found small quantities of cannabis, amphetamines, and a mysterious white powder, which was never conclusively identified, and promptly arrested Mick and Keith. The bust became front-page news, with the Daily Mirror running the now infamous headline, "Naked Girl at Stone's Party," immediately sensationalizing Marianne's presence. The Daily Express wrote of her as a fallen woman, while the News of the World fueled salacious rumors, most notably the completely fabricated and deeply damaging Mars bar myth, which Marianne has vehemently denied. Quote, "I've hated being associated with that famous confection. I don't eat them and I never have, and what is said to have happened just never did," she later stated. It meant the loss of my feminine self. The fallout had lasting repercussions, and she later admitted, quote, "I really thought I had blown my career." The trial that started in May was a media circus, with the Times running a surprisingly sympathetic editorial famously declaring, "There must remain a suspicion in this case that Mr. Jagger received a sentence not because of what he had done, but because of who he was." Mick and Keith were both convicted, but later had their sentences overturned. For Marianne, however, the damage was lasting. She was vilified in the press, and the event triggered a personal spiral. Quote, "Redlands changed everything," she later admitted. "It was the beginning of the end for me." After the trial, Mick didn't miss a beat. He continued as normal, and Marianne tried to do the same. Their relationship was going well, and so was her career. She was in demand not only as a singer but also as an actress, and she enjoyed traveling around the world. However, she never went on tour with the Stones. I want to issue a little trigger warning here because what I'm going to read you now is going to include an account of physical violence. So if that's just not in the books for you today, then that is fine. I'm gonna put the timestamp here for you to skip to. Take care of yourself. That is more important than reading every excerpt of this book. I never went on tour with the Stones. I once joined Mick on tour and it resulted in the most horrendous incident of our entire relationship. After that, I never went again. I went straight to the hotel and waited for him to come back from the concert. It had been a very wild tour. There was a lot of haywire energy. I remember reading about it in the flight over. Kids rioting, incredibly violent clashes between fans and the carabinieri. Thousands of young Italian male groupies attacking the limo, rocking it, trying to overturn it. Grotesque photos from inside of hands and faces squished up against the glass like animal faces. Bacon paintings. At the concert, girls pulled off their panties and threw them on the stage. It was their first taste of the big time. Not just screaming fans, but your actual Italian aristos and movie stars paying homage to them. There were riots in Rome when Brigitte Bardot and Gina Lalla Brigada attended the Stones concert there. Evidently, there had again been riots at the show that night. People had been trampled. Mick came straight from the concert to the hotel. I was waiting for him in the bed in my negligee. The minute he walked in, he was a different person. It was as if he were someone I didn't know. He was absolutely possessed. As if he had brought in with him whatever disruptive energy was going on at that concert. It goes both ways, from the performer to the audience, and then it comes back at you magnified. He didn't say hello, he didn't even acknowledge me. He just walked over to the bed and began slapping me across the face. Not a word was spoken. I was absolutely terrified and I fled into the big wide bathroom. He followed me in there and continued to hit me. He beat me quite badly and I didn't have a clue why. My first thought was, oh shit, he must have found out that I had a little night with Keith. Such a ridiculous thought. In any case, I knew Keith would never in 1,000 years have told anybody. Nothing brought it on. It just erupted out of some inner turmoil as if a demonic force had taken him over. When it was over, it was like a hurricane that spent itself and stopped. We never, ever mentioned it. To this day, I don't know what it was about. He never did anything like that again. He's not the kind of person who would. I don't think it was anything to do with me or him. He didn't know what he was doing, a victim of mob lunacy. It was on that tour that it all started to change. But Marianne forgave him. Something about her ability to forgive over and over again really stunned me while reading this book. She has so much empathy with every single person she encounters, and the only person she doesn't seem to have empathy with is herself. She's always so harsh towards herself, and that breaks my heart because I really know that feeling, and I feel like a lot of people do. And you can just tell that she was such a loving and caring person, and I know that there were people in her circle who treated her really well. For example, Anita, the both of them became great friends. They loved each other. We're going to talk about that later. But there were also always people who took advantage of that. And as much as I do think Mick loved her, I do also believe that he took advantage of that every now and then. Quote, Mick and I were blissfully happy that summer. We were in love, we were young, rich, protected, and the world was at our feet. Mick wanted us to get married and have children. He felt that after the bust and trial, this would be a good move, and he probably was right. It certainly would have been a good PR move, but in my normal, perverse way, I wouldn't hear of it. I wasn't even divorced yet. Chapter 5, Sister Morphine. As 1968 rolled around, Mick grew restless. The drug busts and Brian's troubles had kept the Stones from touring for too long, fueling his desire for a new adventure. He decided to star in the film Performance alongside Anita Pallenberg. While Performance was being filmed, I felt quite secure that I had nothing to worry about. I never imagined Mick would be fucking Anita. I saw Anita as very much a victim in all of this, the vulnerable one who should have been looked after and protected. Her breakup with Brian over the previous year had been devastating. It was only natural that she would find Mick's incarnation of Turner irresistible. The characters were propelled towards each other, and she already had a hard time distinguishing what was real and what was imaginary. I tried not to think about it at all. I concentrated on living with my mother and Nicholas in Ireland and pretending everything was okay. Anita was my dearest friend, and Mick was the man I loved. I was expecting his baby. I guess I knew by then that things weren't right between Mick and me, but I didn't know what to do about it. It was terrible. You can feel in every word of this book how much Marianne loved Mick, and I want to believe that he adored her just as much. Marianne's biggest struggle with Mick always was his inability to communicate. He didn't talk about anything ever. He was always there to have a good time, but she felt like she couldn't confide in him with her deep feelings and troubles. However, they always reconciled, and I truly believe that they were in love, but it also was this kind of like dysfunctional love that never really worked. The both of them stayed, even after they broke up, great friends for the rest of her life. They always checked in with each other. They really had so much love for each other, but it was also a very destructive relationship. I want to issue another trigger warning here. The next excerpt I'm going to read you talks about child loss, pregnancy loss, and if that just doesn't sound like something you want to listen to today, skip ahead. I have the timestamp right here, and take care of yourself. The most serious unspoken thing between us was the loss of our baby, Corinna. I had miscarried after returning from Ireland. I was too anemic for the baby to come to term. I felt devastated and guilty, and it took me ages before I could even begin to grapple with my feelings about it. I began turning to drugs, chiefly barbs and alcohol, to block it out. It was at this point that it all became a feminine morality play. I was somewhat surprised how quickly Mick seemed to be able to snap back from the loss. He just plunged into his work, and now that Keith lived next door, there was nothing to stop him from working day and night. Whenever Mick felt like he'd been ignoring me, he would turn up with roses or jewelry, but I always lost the jewelry, and I've never cared much for out-of-season roses. Mick was around less and less. He was working all the time. I was back to my old routines. I often used to go out alone. Sometimes I would go out to events. I particularly wanted to go out as a proxy for Mick. There is nothing as heartbreaking as losing your child, and after I went through that last year, I really wouldn't wish it upon my worst enemy. And to think that Marianne was going through this kind of by herself, because yes, her mother was there, but I feel like this is a situation where you very much need your partner, and I feel so bad for her that Mick wasn't there and that he couldn't talk about it. And I do believe that it probably hurt him just as much, and he was just coping in a different way. I feel like it is a very typical coping thing to actually dive headfirst into work, but I do feel really bad for Marianne because she felt like she had to go through all of this alone. And from, as said, going through this myself, I can just tell you that they will give you, I don't know what it was like back then, but I got so many addresses and like numbers to call and people to reach out to, but yet this is like such a private and personal matter that you also don't really feel confident and comfortable reaching out to strangers about it. And I am very lucky that I'm in a relationship where we can talk about things like this, and we talked about this for weeks and months on end, and we still talk about it. And I do have a friend group where I can do the same thing, and the fact that Marianne didn't felt like that just breaks my heart. But yeah, Mick has never publicly spoken about losing Corinna, and I want to give him the benefit of the doubt. I want to say that he probably struggled with it as much as she did, just in a different way, and it still breaks my heart for her. Mick began to distance himself, working constantly, and Marianne returned to her solitary routines. She had always enjoyed going out, even alone, and with Mick always working and touring, she soon went back to her old ways. During this time, Marianne and Anita formed an incredibly close bond, spending their days together bored and feeling useless. They connected through their shared interest in magic and books, creating a world of escapism. discussing everything but their underlying anxieties. They used acid and dressed up, creating a world of escapism. Quote, Anita's idea of helping those days was to give you drugs, and there's nothing quite like drugs for making time pass. We did what girls do, took baths together. I was madly in love with Anita. She was so gorgeous. There's actually one story in the book where the both of them almost made out, like they were practically making out, but they were almost about to sleep with each other. And I found that really interesting because I knew that these two had such a close bond. I adore them together, and I'm so happy that they had each other because I've read this in some book about the Stones. If I remember it, I'm going to put it in the description box, how the Stones were always married to their music first. First came music, then came women. And for a while, first came music, then came drugs, then came women. And I do feel bad for them because this might seem like such a good life. You have all the money, you can do whatever you want. But I get how you will get bored if you don't have a way to go. If there's nothing that needs you, nothing that needs to be done, if you don't really have like anything to do, I get how that'll bore you. And I love that the two of them had each other, and I love that they were somewhat in love, because I feel like the line between a deep loving friendship and a committed relationship is not that thick, to be honest. On July 3rd of 1969, Brian Jones died. His death deeply affected everyone, particularly Anita. Quote, Anita eventually took the goddess business one step further into witchcraft. There were moments, especially after Brian died, where she went a little mad. Brian's death also affected Marianne in a sense that she kind of realized that they weren't immortal. They were doing so many drugs and they were having this lavish life, and why they knew that drugs were dangerous. This was a time where there hadn't been that many deaths from it. And Brian was the first person in the Stone Circle, and kind of like the first person Marianne knew really well to die in a drug-related death. He drowned, and this really shook her, and this is the first time that she thinks about actually stopping to take drugs. But the thing is, she's also quite deep into her addiction at this point. But from now on, it will have that underlying feeling of, I am not immortal and I might die doing this. Marianne stood by her friend through it all. After Keith and Anita began their relationship, the four became inseparable. They traveled to Brazil and spent all their time together. The next serious rift in my relationship with Mick came about over Sister Morphine. I began to lose my way. My dilemma as a pop singer had been that I felt my career was a dead end. I was bogged down in the banality of the material. I had neither the resourcefulness necessary to wring changes on it, nor the will needed to surmount it. My career had been a fluke, and I had run with it as fast as I could. All I could do was go on and on, making slight variations on a theme that was becoming monotonous. At best, I was a curious anomaly in the mechanics of pop. As a performer, I was only average. I do feel bad for Marianne because I just don't understand why she thought she was a bad or an average performer, because when I see her perform, I think she's incredible. I think she has this like special something about her. Just watch her at the Rolling Stones Rock and Roll Circus. She was so good, and I really adore her, and I do feel bad for her that she didn't feel like she was good enough in a sense. Marianne had released her last song, Is This What I Get for Loving You, in February of 1967, but had already lost interest in it before its release. She felt like the material presented to her didn't reflect her true artistic inclinations. However, she had seen what the Stones had done and what pop music could become. Quote, Sister Morphine was an attempt to do that myself, to make art out of a pop song. People tend to assume that Sister Morphine comes from an incident in my life, that it is a parable of a junkie's last hours, but at the time I wrote it, I'd only taken smack once. I was still far from becoming a junkie. Sister Morphine was in my head, my feeling about what it might be to be an addict. Sister Morphine is the story of a man who has had a terrible car accident. He's dying and he's in tremendous pain, and the lyrics of the song are addressed to the nurse. Yet when this song was released in 1972 on the Rolling Stones' Sticky Fingers, Marianne suddenly became synonymous with the song's character. Mick wrote the music for his sister Morphine in a garden in Rome where they were staying with Keith and Anita. Initially, it was just a riff and he worked on the melody for about 6 more months, constantly strumming it around the house. Quote, "It got to the point where I realized that if someone didn't write the lyrics, we'd be hearing this for the next 10 years. Mick seemed to have no idea what kind of words would go with the music. Maybe he was waiting for me to do it. That wouldn't have surprised me." Ultimately, it was Mick who decided to record Marianne's version of Sister Morphine. It was released in England in February of 1969, but after a mere 2 days, Decca Records abruptly pulled it from the shelf without any explanation or apology towards Marianne. It was as if I had been busted again. I assumed Decca wasn't going to allow me to contaminate the minds of young people. Chapter 6: Wild Horses. In the summer of 1969, Marianne traveled to Sydney with the Stones. By then, she was deep into her drug addiction, anorexic and deteriorating. I feel like we're at a point in the video where every excerpt I read, I'm gonna have to issue a trigger warning. This time, I would like to issue it because of themes of self-harm and suicide. So, if that isn't what you want to hear today, just skip ahead, please, and take care. By the time we got to the hotel in Sydney, I'd forgotten not only where I was, but who I was. I looked in the mirror. What I saw was a very thin, frightened face. I'd cut my hair, I was anorexic, and my skin looked cadaverous. I saw someone literally falling apart. Someone with blonde hair and looking very scared. In my drug-induced stupor, I dimly recognized the ravaged face of Brian Jones staring back at me. I was Brian, and I was dead. You might think that at such a point of stupefaction I had reached the nadir of my willful descent into self-destruction, but you wouldn't be mistaken. It was only the beginning. At that moment, Brian was my twin. I identified with him because he had been a public sacrifice. It was a role I understood. Quite logically, I thought I was Brian. It was all very rational in the way these things are when you're unhinged. I reasoned that since I was Brian and since Brian was dead, I had to take the rest of the pills so I could be dead too. I took the pills. Mick was asleep. I walked around the room. I looked out of the window. Our hotel was on the 45th floor and it looked out over Sydney Harbor. I attempted to open a window, but the windows didn't open. Had I been able to open a window, I would have jumped. The turnstiles were taking forever to kick in. I looked down and saw things on the street that shouldn't have been there. I recognized a number of people and waved to them. And then I saw Brian Jones. At that moment, I went into a coma that lasted 6 days. When I first spotted Brian, he was far below at street level, but greatly enlarged. A blow-up of himself, various parts of him, his face and his hands, expanded and extended toward me as he spoke, and then he rose straight up as if on a shaft of air until he was directly opposite the window of our room. He was boxy with a wan face, dressed in King's Road medieval in lace and fur, with red and yellow striped pants. His hair was green, and Buddhist lightning bolts were tattooed on his palms. As he raised the palms of his hand to me, he smiled that pan smirk of his. He beaconed to me the way the spirits traditionally beacon to mortals in the movies. I passed through the plate of glass and found myself outside. But instead of standing suspended above the street, I was now in an unstable landscape that pulsed and shifted as we spoke. I assumed, gone over to the other side. There was no weather, no wind, no rain or sunshine or darkness. There was nothing recognizable at all. The grandeur of enormity of the place had the phantasmagoric mood of illustrations by Edmond Dulac or Dürer's engravings of hell. As we were walking along, I realized that Brian had no more idea of where we were going than I did. Obviously, he had woken up dead, not known where he was, and decided to call for me. It was the nicest chat I ever had with him, actually. He told me how he had woken up and put out his hand for his bottle of Valium, and about the panic that had seized him when he found nothing there. He said he had been lonely and confused and had brought me to him because he needed to talk to someone he knew. We strolled blithely along as the quivering earth crumbled away on either side of us, and he told me about his miniature coronation set with the beef eaters and the coach and horses. He said he liked books about railway bridges and guides to switching boxes, George MacDonald's fairy stories, and Fox's Book of Martyrs. I'd said I'd get them for him when I go back to London. Afterward, he became weepy, like the mock turtle in Alice in Wonderland, and said he was very sorry to have put me to all this trouble. He didn't seem to know he was dead. I'm sure this happens frequently when people die violent, unexpected deaths. They don't know where they are. Hence ghosts. There was, I realized, a distinct possibility that I might already be one myself. Brian dear, isn't this lovely, I said, trying, as usual, to distract him from grisly realities. But my sudden descent to small talk must have tipped him off that something was wrong. I was speaking to him in the patronizing way people talk to mad people, children and small dogs. Nevertheless, he plunged ahead in typical Brian fashion. Death is the next great adventure, he said portentously. This was something I used to go around saying myself, so I nodded wisely. Oh yes, I quite agree, I said fervently, as if I were speaking of a new religion, or a new drug. His mood changed abruptly. Was it beginning to dawn on him where he was? Had I, perhaps, transferred the thought telepathically to him? He turned and put his hands on my shoulders. Welcome to death, he said brightly. I wasn't quite ready to be that enthusiastic about our situation, and tried to treat it like a joke. Oh, is that where we are? I asked. Well, you won't find any hotels here, darling, or any restaurants either. You won't need 'em. I didn't like the drift of this conversation. We came to the edge of the Dulag landscape. It dropped off abruptly and completely. There was a very obvious point where you chose whether you want to go over the edge or not. Brian said, coming, and slipped off the cliff. I drew back. I heard a chorus of voices calling to me, but I wasn't ready just yet. Getting back took a long time. I was stranded in a deserted town. The color had been drained from everything. The houses were empty. I was in Albania, wandering down long deserted streets with names like the Avenue of the 17th of October, looking utterly incongruous. People I knew floated by. Their feet didn't quite touch the ground. I called out, but they hurried past as if they hadn't seen me. I was lost in an airport. People came up and asked me the sort of questions you ask a child when stranded at a railway station. Are you lost, dear? Do you know your name? And I would answer, I'm waiting for Mick to come and get me, which, in a sense, he did. If he had not woken up and got me to the hospital as quickly as he did, I actually would have gone over with Brian. When I opened my eyes 6 days later, I came back to life in an upside-down country, Australia. I feel like when you get into 60s and 70s biographies, you will read a lot of near-death experiences, but I have to say no one ever phrased it as beautifully as Marianne did. I really got lost in that chapter of her book, and I find it really interesting how all of these thoughts came to her while she was in that coma, because I don't know, there's no way to explain this. It's just what happened in her mind, but it felt so real to her in that moment. When she woke up, Mick was in the hospital with her, alongside her mother, who had been by her side for the entire 6 days. Mick felt responsible for Marianne's struggles. He began writing love letters and notes trying to win her back, but Marianne was slipping away, and deep down, they both knew it. What Mick did throughout all this, what he always did, was pay for everything. After a month or so in Australia, I went to Switzerland and saw a very good doctor, a woman psychiatrist, who really did help me. But not once did anybody suggest I stop using drugs. The cops, I supposed, had they been consulted, would have recommended I stop. But among my friends, it was assumed, I think, that I was incapable of stopping. I feel like something that comes up over and over again in 60s biographies is that there was this turning point in the 1960s where people realized how harmful drugs really were. Because in the early 60s, mid-60s, a lot of drugs weren't even illegal yet. People didn't really know how bad they were, or they closed their minds to how bad they were. And then there was this point in the late 60s with a lot of drug deaths, and for Marianne, it definitely also was Brian's death that kind of made people understand how dangerous this actually was. And I feel like I spoke about this in the Ozzy Clark video, this is the point where it went two ways. There were the people who were able to stop and get treatment, and there were the people who couldn't and died eventually. Quote, Mick knew I was slipping away, and he made one last courtly and romantic gesture. Mick, being a Leo, is a master of ritual and symbolism. Every time we would start to break up, he would write me another song. This time he said, I have something I want you to hear. He went over to the stereo and put on a tape. Then he knelt down in front of me, took both of my hands in his, and looked into my eyes, and on came Wild Horses. I hugged him, and I cried for what might have been. It took another couple of months for them to finally break up, but this had been the final straw. As much as they loved each other, they both knew they just couldn't make it. Marianne's relationship with Mick influenced several Rolling Stones songs. Sympathy for the Devil from Beggar's Banquet from 1968 was partially inspired by The Master and Margarita, a novel by Mikhail Bulgakov that Marianne introduced to Mick. You Can't Always Get What You Want from Let It Bleed from 1969 was reportedly written about her, while White Horses and I Got the Blues from Sticky Fingers from 1971 were also influenced by her experiences. She co-wrote Sister Morphine, though the writing credit became the subject of a prolonged legal dispute that was ultimately resolved in her favor. Basically, Mick said that Marianne didn't participate in writing this song, that he wrote it by himself, and it bugs me so much because this was the first song Marianne released that she had written parts of, and the lyrics are great. It's a phenomenal song, and the fact that Mick, who has his name on so many records, on so many songs, he has written so many phenomenal songs, couldn't even let her have this one, just speaks volume about his ego, because as said, the two of them weren't on bad terms generally. It was just this one thing that he couldn't let her have. It's impossible to talk about the Rolling Stones without talking about Marianne. For a little while she was part of the Stones, part of their world and inner circle. She shaped them as people and musicians, just like they shaped her. It's impossible to imagine one of the two without the other. Chapter 7, Faithless. Right after her breakup with Mick, Marianne had to endure another very public separation. Her divorce from John Dunbar. Remember how I said that it took until 1970 for them to resolve their divorce? Well, we're there now, and it didn't go the best way, to just say that out front. He divorced her citing adultery with Mick, and the papers sensationalized this, titling Marianne Wasn't Faithful. She spiraled deeper into her drug addiction as Mick married Bianca. She began drinking and doing drugs every day. Eventually, she moved back in with her mother, who took care and took over caring not only of Marianne but also of Nicholas, and just running the house in general. Marianne felt useless, spending her days in a drugged haze. Such a heartbreaking part of the story, because her mother came in wanting to help, and Marianne needed that help, but at the same time, because her mother took over everything and all the responsibilities, Marianne had all of this time on her hands again, and she just went out and took even more drugs. She met a man named Paddy, who was kind and loving and tried to care for her. He eventually proposed, but Marianne wasn't in love. Quote, after about a year and a half of trying to be good and do what my mother wanted to do and what Paddy wanted, one day I split and shortly after went to live on my wall. I still had my beautiful engagement ring, which of course I left in some dealer's sink. The hardest part about her divorce from John was the custody battle about Nicholas. John told the court that he felt Marianne was unfit as a mother and that neither she nor her mother could properly care for Nicholas. It seems so unfair to Marianne, who had taken care of her son so well during the early parts of their relationships, when John was always doing drugs and being high. And even though I understand that she definitely wasn't fit as a mother at this point, taking the child away from her, even though it might have been the last resort, was so hard for her. And I don't understand why her son couldn't stay with her mother. Because yes, she was a little older, but truthfully, I don't know if John was more fit than Marianne. He wasn't as deep into active drug addiction at this point, but I just don't think it is fair. It is this constant thing that we do where women are upheld to a higher standard than men. For example, I didn't talk about this in the Yoko video, but it came up a lot in my research, how Yoko was criticized, and I want to say rightfully, for leaving behind her daughter, but the way that she was criticized is very different from the way that men and fathers get criticized for leaving behind their children. And there is no difference, in my opinion. Like, whether you're the mom or the dad, you're a parent and you have a responsibility and you just can't leave. Quote, the saddest consequence of the trial was that Nicholas thought that because I no longer lived with him, I no longer love him. So Nicholas went on to live with John and his girlfriend at the time, model Jean Shrimpton. Marianne wouldn't see her son for years to come. There is this strange entanglement that Marianne has with the Shrimpton sisters. First, Mick is dating Chrissy Shrimpton when they meet, and now her son goes on to live with Jean Shrimpton, who's Chrissy's older sister. I don't even know why I wanted to point that out here. It just came back to me while researching and while reading this book, how the 1960s scene that we talk about and that we now know and that is remembered so well was such a tightly knit cosmos of people. The 1970s proved to be the hardest decade of Marianne's life, a harrowing journey through addiction, poverty, and a desperate struggle for survival. Her once promising career spiraled into turmoil and a desperate struggle for survival, and her public appearances became sparse. Doing drugs and hanging around London went from fun to gruesome, and Marianne felt like she was losing herself. There aren't many documented performances of her in the early part of the decade, but one is as legendary as infamous. While in the beginning of the decade she had done some TV gigs, including The Door of Opportunity in 1970 and The Stronger and Terrible Jim Fitch in the following year, nothing quite came of it. But in October 1973, she performed Sonny and Cher's I Got You Babe, alongside David Bowie wearing a nun's costume. This has to be one of the most legendary live performances of the entire 1970s. It is infamous. In my opinion, it is wonderful. Think about it what you will, but I think one thing is clear as day, and that is that even in this state, her talent was truly undeniable. But her struggles with her heroin addiction and anorexia nervosa were rapidly overshadowing her public persona. By the mid-1970s, she was living on the streets of Soho. Quote, I was hanging around in Soho, sleeping at friends' places or wherever I could. Friends attempted to intervene time and time again, enrolling her in an NHS heroin-assisted treatment program, but she found it impossible to control or stabilize her addiction. In 1971, producer Mike Leander had attempted to revive her career with the album Rich Kid Blues. The album's raw, confessional tone reflected her own turbulent state and showed her range as an artist, but it remained unreleased until 1985, a lost artifact of her struggle. By 1975, she recorded Dreaming My Dreams, a country-inflected album that initially went unnoticed. However, it was later re-released in 1978 as Faithless, featuring additional tracks, and found unexpected success in Ireland, reaching number 1 on the Irish album charts. During this period, Marianne lived in extreme poverty, squatting in a Chelsea flat without hot water or electricity with her then boyfriend Ben Brierly, bassist of the punk band The Vibrators. She also shared accommodations with writer and socialite Henrietta Morris in Chelsea and Regent's Park, who didn't have anything either. This once again showed me how kind and loving Marianne was. Even when she didn't have anything, she still shared with the people around her. Chapter 8, Broken English, the comeback of a lifetime. The late 1970s saw hope on the horizon. In 1979, after years of obscurity, Marianne made a triumphant return with Broken English, an album that would redefine her whole career. Many artists have tried comebacks, many failed and some succeeded, but no one had a comeback like Marianne Faithfull. She completely reinvented herself and proved her depth as a singer, songwriter, and performer. That same year, she was arrested for marijuana possession in Norway, yet this marked a period of creative and personal resurgence. Heavily influenced by the punk movement and her relationship with Ben, whom she married later that year, the album blended sharp social commentary with a raw, uncompromising sound. The record's most controversial song, Why'd You Do It?, featured scratching, sexually charged lyrics adapted from a poem by Heathcote Williams. Musically, the track incorporated a complex structure, fusing hard rock and reggae elements with a tango rhythm. Guitarist Barry Reynolds' riff emphasized offbeat accents, creating an unsettling and urgent feel. Marianne herself later described her performance on the track as an early form of rap. Broken English laid bare the full extent of Marianne's years of addiction, with her once melodic voice transformed into a deep, grasping growl. Perfectly suited the album's themes of despair, defiance, and political unrest. Quote, "I destroyed my voice with drinks and drugs," she admitted, "but in a way it gave me something new, a different kind of strength." However, her comeback wasn't without setbacks. A February 1980 appearance on Saturday Night Live was widely criticized, with many suspecting drug use was to blame for her voice seizing up, though others attributed it to excessive rehearsals. Despite these challenges, Broken English produced one of the most enduring songs, The Ballad of Lucy Jordan, released as a single in October of 1979. The melancholic tale of suburban disillusionment resonated deeply with audiences and went on to feature in several films. Marianne later performed the song during a guest appearance in the 4th season of Absolutely Fabulous, and it found new life in 2016 when it was used in the finale of American Horror Story Hotel. Reflecting on the song's meaning in 2007 in an interview on ITV's The South Bank Show, Marianne remarked, quote, "It's a song of quiet, unrelenting despair, a woman realizing that everything she dreamed of has slipped away." The 1970s was a period in which Marianne was in a constant fight for survival. She lived a life of extremes and was able to pull herself back from the brink of total destruction. Many who'd already deemed her lost and forgotten were stunned to see such a glorious comeback. But for Marianne, it wasn't her public life changing that meant the most. After years of being away from her son, they finally got to reconcile, something Marianne referred to as the greatest accomplishment of her life. After the release of Dangerous Acquaintances in 1981, Marianne relocated to New York City. That same year, she contributed vocals to Rupert Hines' single Misplaced Love, which achieved chart success in Australia. Despite her comeback, the mid-1980s saw Marianne grappling with continued addiction. A severe fall resulting in a broken jaw while she was on drugs hospitalized her for a while and kept her career from moving forward. In 1985, Marianne pulled the ripcord when she entered the Hazelden Foundation Clinic in Minnesota for rehabilitation and received further treatment at McLean Hospital in Belmont, Massachusetts. She was set to finally recover. I cannot imagine how hard it must have been after almost 20 years of drug addiction to go into rehab. And I mentioned it earlier, many people had given up on her, and I feel like at times she had given up on herself, but there was a part inside of her, and that brings me back to the very first excerpt I read to you about her mother, who also always got her way. And it just seems like Marianne still had this will to fight inside of her, and she was able to recover fully from a drug addiction like that. And that's truly, truly applaudable. It is an incredible achievement. While staying at a nearby Cambridge hotel, she began an affair with Howard Toss, a man with a dual diagnosis which ended tragically with his suicide. In 1987, she dedicated Strange Weather to him, and her divorce from Ben Brierly was finalized. In 1995, she memorialized Howard in Flaming September. In 1995, she memorialized Howard in Flaming September on A Secret Life. In 1987, Marianne released the jazz and blues album Strange Weather, produced by Hal Wilner, which received critical acclaim. She revisited As Tears Go By, now with a more gravelly voice. She stated, 40 is the age to sing it, not 17, reflecting on her growth not only as a singer but also as a person. The album featured diverse covers, including those by Bob Dylan, Jerome Kern, Billie Holiday, and Tom Waits. In 1988, she married again, this time a man called Diogo della Terza. They separated soon after divorcing in 1991. Chapter 9, There Will Be Stars. The 2000s saw Marianne return to her acting roots. She embraced both comedic and dramatic performances, notably portraying God in Absolutely Fabulous and the Devil in The Black Rider. Her film work included appearances in Far From China, Intimacy, Nordplage, and Marie Antoinette, where she portrays Empress Maria Theresa, Marie Antoinette's mother, an ode to her mother's roots. A highlight was her starring role in Irina Palm, released in 2007, which earned her a European Film Award nomination for her compelling portrayal of a widow turned sex worker. I said it before, Girl on the Motorcycle is one of my favorite films with Marianne Faithfull, but Irina Palm is like right below it. It's such a phenomenal film. It is heartbreaking, but her acting is so good. She's incredible in this film, and I think she was able to pull from her life experiences and was able to portray this character in a very real and raw way. It seemed after all these years of struggling, Marianne had made a full return. She and Anita stayed friends their entire life until Anita's death in 2017. In a piece for The Guardian, she spoke about their deep bond. Quote, "I do wonder how her life would have been different, of course, but come on, she had a wonderful life. I miss calling her up about a lyric and her always saying something brilliant. I miss her more than I can tell you. Every morning when I wake up, I read a poem that makes me think about her, Sarah Teasdale's There Will Be Stars. It speaks to me so much about her." Then she reads a little bit from it. "There will be stars over the place forever. Though the house we loved and the street we loved are lost, there will be stars forever while we sleep." That's Anita to me. Chapter 10, The Woman Who Lived. Marianne Faithfull passed away on January 30th, 2025. Marianne, the woman who had outlived so many, who had clawed her way back from the edge more times than anyone could count, was gone. The news spread quickly, and for a moment the world seemed to pause. Fans wept openly, tributes poured in from artists, writers, and musicians who had been touched by her singular voice and her defiant spirit. Quote, "She was the last great survivor," Keith Richards wrote in a heartfelt note. "A warrior, a poet, a queen of the underground. I'll miss her forever." Her funeral was an intimate, somber affair attended by those who had truly known and loved her. There was no grand spectacle, no ostentatious send-off, just a handful of people standing together in the cold saying goodbye. In the days that followed, old footage of Marianne flooded television screens and social media feeds, her youthful face beaming in grainy black and white, her voice carrying through time. The world mourned, but there was also gratitude. Gratitude that she had lived and that she had endured, that she had left behind something beautiful. She taught us what it meant to survive, Patti Smith wrote. She was the phoenix over and over again, and now she rests. And so Marianne Faithfull was gone. But like all great legends, she would never truly fade. When I was writing the script for the podcast initially, and then I was revisiting it for this video, I had no clue how to end this, because there's so much that I want to say about her and about the way that she touches me, but then I also want to keep some things to myself. I don't even know. It's so hard to end someone's life story, and so I decided to end it the way that Marianne ended her book, because I feel like that's the way she would have wanted it. Have I forgotten anything? I've always thought that the proper way to end one's life story is with a bit of practical advice, something that sums up one's long and hard-won experience. How to pack a suitcase, how to butter a biscuit without breaking it. I loved Marlene Dietrich's autobiography, which really has nothing in it, except how to sew lavender bags, lay a drawer, and brush a dog. Let's see, how about my chicken with lemon and garlic? Okay, here it goes. Chicken, butter, garlic, fresh tarragon, has to be fresh, snipped with the scissors. Salt and pepper the chicken liberally, inside and out. Put half a lemon inside the chicken, along with a knob of butter and the fresh tarragon. On the outside, you put the garlic, juice of a lemon, and butter. Baste continually. And the thing about mashed potatoes is not to forget that pinch of nutmeg. So that is it for my deep dive into Marianne Faithfull's life. I really wanted to make this video because she inspires me so greatly. I have her haircut. She is one of the greatest muses and will always be one of the greatest muses in my life. And I am so thankful to know of her, and I'm so thankful for this book that she wrote and all the wonderful accounts out there. And I truly believe that she lived a life worth remembering, and I hope that this video will do a little part in that. But yeah, let me know what you think in the comments. And before I end this video today, welcome to the giveaway section. You've made it through I don't know how many hours of this video, but if you're still here, you can win a couple of things. I had no clue what to give away because the demographic of this channel is like young girls who love 60s and 70s fashion, and then people who lived in the 60s and 70s and who are more here for the stories. It's all over the place. So I decided to go with 3 prizes. To enter, please leave a comment under this video, comment something about this video, and then what you would like to win of the 3 packages that I'm giving away. You also have to be subscribed, and I will reach out to you and like reply to your comment, ask for your email, and you can give me your address. Please don't put your address on YouTube. Everyone can see it. Don't do it. But yeah, I'm really excited to do this, and I wish all of you the best of luck, and I want to thank you once again from the bottom of my heart for the love and support, for coming here, watching these videos, reaching out. It honestly means the world. So I decided to put together 3 prizes that fall into a category each. This is the first one. This is kind of like the book biography gift. Then there's a prize related to 60s and 70s homeware, and one for all the fashion people out there. Let's start with the first one. I'm giving away a biography. I recently read this. It's phenomenal. This is Janice, Her Life and Music by Holly George Warren. It's a great copy. It's in really good condition. I only read through it once, so that's kind of like the condition you'll get. Yeah, I'll also obviously include the note. And then I made this book, actually. I made 2 of these. One I used to plan my wedding. The other one I still have, so I decided to also add this little notebook. It's hand sewn, has numbers of pages for you to write down whatever you want. It's nice, thick paper, binded with this vintage fabric that I found. So yeah, if you want to win this, just say biography or something like that. Number 2, the homeware prize. I promise I will pack this as well as possible, and I will put like handle with care and everything on a box. I will find some fabric scraps, I don't know, but I will pack this and make sure that it'll hopefully arrive at your home safe. I'm giving away these 2 little mugs. They're both, probably this one's more from like the 70s, this one's from the 60s. It's both like classic German porcelain brands that I found at a thrift store. I have tons of these mugs, and you always reach out and tell me you love them, so I decided to give these 2 away alongside this little jug that can be used for milk or whatever you want to put in. I also have used this before for flowers. It's just beautiful, and so I hope whoever wins this is happy with it. Just put mugs, porcelain, something like that in the comments. And then last but not least, I had a hard time finding a fashion related price because it is so hard with sizing and everything. But if you want more fashion giveaways, go over to my Instagram. I'm at Emma Rosa Katarina everywhere. There too, because I do fashion giveaways a little more frequent over there. This is a little 3-piece set. I'm giving away these really cool Janis Joplin style sunglasses. I've had them for several years. They're vintage, but they're still in great condition. So yeah, I really hope you're gonna love these. And then I'm giving away this like little travel organizer for jewelry. You can unbutton this and put in your rings. And it also has all of these other little compartments. It's beautiful fabric. Yeah, I really hope you love this. And then last but not least, I picked this up at a thrift store a while ago. For some reason, this has like Jerusalem down here. But I always thought that this was perfect for hippie looks. I've used it a couple of times. I just don't wear it as much because I have a bag really similar to this. But tooled leather was a huge trend in the 60s. It's just like a little tie bag that you can wear like this. I think it's pretty. It also has a bunch of compartments on the outside here. And I hope whoever gets this loves it as much as I do. So yeah, that is it for today's video. That is it for the giveaway. Thank you so much again, not only for watching, but for watching all of my videos and always being here. I hope you have a beautiful day. Go out, enjoy the sunshine, take yourself some time to focus on you and your mental health today, and I will catch you in the next video. Bye, dolls! I'm actually leaving for London in a couple of days, so get ready for lots of fun London adventures to land on the channel too. But yeah, I'll see you then. Bye, dolls!